Hello friends and welcome to another video, this time doing a deep dive into the recently released Ubisoft trailer for the Assassin's Creed Valhalla game coming out this year. In this video I want to take the opportunity to examine some more evidence-based reasons for why I like or dislike some of the things in this trailer. My area of interest is fibre and textile crafts, and so by no means am I an expert in arms and armour. So if you would like to learn a little bit more about the arms and armour in this one, you can check out a video done by Shadiversity, who has already gone over a bunch of this stuff in detail. Now, I don't agree with everything that Shadiversity has said, but then again, I don't necessarily agree with all of my first reactions either. So that's why I think it's important to do a bit more of a deep dive. Let's start with a bit of a preface. What do we know about what's going on in Assassin's Creed Valhalla? Well, we know that the game follows protagonist Eivor, who can be played as either male or female. Both are canon and apparently both affect the story. We first meet Eivor in Norway in 873, which is nearly 100 years after the raid on Lindisfarne, so the Viking Age is well and truly in full swing. We know that one of our major antagonists will be King Alfred, which is Alfred the Great, who we know reigned as King of Wessex from 871 and eventually became King of all England, reigning until 899. How the Assassins and the Templars are going to play into this, we don't know yet, and that's part of the exciting part. Okay, so now I want to get into the breakdown. I'm not going to play the whole video out in one long lot and just keep breaking it up. I just want to identify each individual bit in the different scenes as they appeared, so you can go through and watch the full trailer if you want to. I will also link to the Ubisoft trailer in the description below. The trailer opens with a view of a settlement in Norway. I really love this, it's very picturesque and I'm very excited to be able to explore this settlement, but I do have a couple of things to comment on. First of all, what you can see in the dead center of this picture is what looks to be a stave church. Now, stave churches are in fact common enough in Norway, and they're common in many other parts of Scandinavia too. They still exist today, you can visit many of them. However, stave churches are not common for the Viking period. Their predecessors, the palisade churches, might have been. So it'll be interesting to see whether or not this is actually a stave church, as it appears to be, or whether or not it's a palisade church. There's a few technical differences there, doesn't matter. What it looks like though is that just from the outside, it looks more like a stave church. Stave churches were commonly built in the 12th and 13th century, and the ones that have been archaeologically excavated do have Christian graves in and around them. So we definitely know that it had to be post-conversion, and post-conversion Christianity had a big influence on things, which is why some of these churches started popping up. While there were Christians trying to convert Vikings or Nordic peoples through the 9th century, it was a really slow, hard slog. They were pretty stubborn, they didn't want to change, and it wasn't really until the later part of the 10th century that Norway specifically converted. They had someone, and I'm probably butchering this name, Hakon the Good. That was the king in Norway at the time who converted to Christianity, and the rest of Norway pretty much followed suit. Obviously there were still pockets that held out for a lot longer, but as a general rule Norway fell under Christianity under his rule. Denmark also converted in the late 10th century, as did many other Scandinavian countries, but they aren't really relevant to this game as far as we know. We're looking at Norway and England specifically. Also in this opening setting we can see some other buildings. So there is what looks to be a longhouse structure, and it looks fairly similar to some modern reconstructions and what we believe the archaeological evidence shows us. The only thing that I would say here is that it appears to have some windows or similar openings along the roofline, and that wasn't so much of a thing for all the evidence that I've seen. The more openings you have in the roof area, the more heat gets let out, and particularly during winter, that's a less desirable trait to have in your buildings. You can see in this shot the stave church as well, so just more confirmation that it's not quite appropriate. Alright, so let's talk about the settlement in England. This actually fills me with a lot of hope. In this particular scene, we can see these skeletal structural pieces that are going to become buildings. Oh boy, am I excited. Obviously, you've got the big longhouse happening at the back there with, again, too many heat loss points. But again, it's pretty close. If you could plug up those holes, it is pretty close to accurate for the Viking period. These other buildings that you can see also excite me. You've got some smaller buildings that are probably going to have some form of thatched roofing, or maybe even turf roofing, which is going to be excellent. And you can see the right hand side of the screen as you focus in from the fight scene into this pleasant settlement being built. That building looks like it's going to be a pit house. Pit houses are kind of cool and a little bit of a niche interest of mine. Again, I'm no expert, but I find them really exciting. So pit houses don't often get found with evidences of hearths. That's cool. That means that they were probably not full-time live-in residences. They might have been summer workshops or storage rooms or things like that. So to see a pit house being included here, kind of awesome. Kids' clothing in this section as well. I kind of love the tablet woven bands being used crisscross like that over the leg coverings. I'm not sure would have been at this time period appropriate, but we do know it happened, it existed, just a little bit earlier as far as I know. And so that inclusion is really cool. The tunics are appropriate lengths, and I really love that they've got both what looks to be a boy and a girl, both practicing with dad or uncle or whoever that is to them. Both of them are learning a form of combat. Even if it is just play fighting, it is still a form of learning, and I love that there's that equality, that they haven't tried to say only boys would have learned combat. That's awesome. Also, I think there's a shot of some woven fencing there, but I'm not really sure yet, and I think if it is woven, another really awesome inclusion. Also, shot of a sword in a scabbard. Thank you, Ubisoft. We don't walk around with sharp blades on our hip and no scabbard. These houses with rather sharp roof lines, totally plausible, totally appropriate for the time period and the location, so that one's a good one. Alright, now let's look at the ships that they're displaying in the trailer. These ships look pretty good. As far as I can see, they are the clinker build or clinker construction method for the boats, which is accurate for the period and for that culture. They look to me to be the style of longship, sometimes called snekker, which is sort of a medium-sized longship. Not a small trading vessel, but not a big longship, sort of something that would sit 30 odd, maybe 40 rowers and one or two extras, maybe. They look to be approximately that size. I could be a little bit off. Again, boats are not my forte. I did find it interesting though, when we're looking at these boats, the sails that they've got there, they've got them in multicolours, which in and of itself might be a thing, in that they might have had natural white wool with natural brown wool or grey wool or something like that. I don't know of any evidence though of dyed sails, so that's a little bit strange. I'd love to see evidence if anyone knows of any, but I haven't seen any yet. And I definitely haven't seen any evidence of an emblazoned logo or sigil or anything on them yet. So that's probably an artistic license that the developers have taken. What I can say about these sails is that these sails probably would have been made of wool, which is pretty good material for that sort of application compared to some of the other materials available to them. And they possibly may have coated it in some sort of oil or fat for a little bit of weather protection. But other than that, I don't really know how much more I can say about these particular sails. There's not much visual representation of them, so I'm only catching glimpses. Let's say it up front right now. The clothing and armour that the Vikings are wearing are almost 100% fantasy. Given that this is the case, there's not really much I can say on it. I'm not going to try and analyse them to find the specks of historical accuracy in there, because it's just not worth it. They're a fantasy group. And when you look at all the other Assassin's Creed games, I'm not entirely surprised. Pretty much every other antagonist and their supporting NPCs, they're pretty much all dressed in very fantastical, not historically accurate clothing. So what were we expecting? Yes, Eivor is wearing fantasy clothes. Yes, the Vikings supporting Eivor are wearing fantasy clothes. At this point, it's not a surprise, no one's shocked, and I'm not going to go into it. I stand by my statement in the first video about what they're wearing on the ships. Even if you were going to wear your fantastical outfits on land, when you're sailing across the sea with minimal protection, why would you have the fur on the outside? Why wouldn't you have it on the inside, keeping you warm? Why wouldn't you be wrapped up in wool cloaks? Why would you not have something on your head, particularly because half your hair's shaved off? There just is so many things about this that I have to question. It's not practical clothing at all. I will say that one thing about Eivor's outfit that I kind of really loved is the brooch. It seems like a tiny detail, but that brooch's detail appears to be in the urns style. So it's a little bit late in the Viking timeline, sure, but just to get the style of decorations appropriate for the Viking Age is kind of cool. The raven logo. We can see ravens are adorned on the sails on the boats, and they are all over the shields, and obviously there's the symbology of Odin's ravens as well, Hugin and Munin. Where did it come from? Is it historically accurate? Why is it in the game? Well, why it's in the game, that's a question for the developers. But the raven is very closely associated with the Norse mythology and is in fact accurate for the reenactments. The earliest evidence I've been able to find of this raven style logo would actually be on a battle standard dated to 878. A banner bearing this bird, which we assume is a raven, is mentioned in an Anglo-Saxon chronicle, so we know that they had them and that they used them. They displayed them proudly. We also have samples of leg wrap hooks that have a raven-esque depiction that are from as far east as Chernigov in the Ukraine. So that's something that traveled wide and far. This particular stylized version of the raven that we see here in the trailer is very commonly used today, and as far as we can tell, is probably semi-common from the Viking Age. I'm really glad that the only horned helmet that we see is on this, I'm going to say priestess. There is so much about the ritual of the Vikings that is very conjectural and we don't really understand a lot of. So if you're going to use the fantasy of horns on helmets, that is about the only place I will forgive you for it. The English, on the other hand, may be worth delving into. Where pretty much every Viking, or everyone that can be established as a Viking on the battlefield, aren't wearing any helmets, which they really should be, the English are wearing helmets, and they look pretty plausible. They do look a little bit out of place, but not all that out of place. So the types of helms that we can see them wearing are either what's called Spangen helms, which have the band construction with the plates that are sort of riveted to them. Some of those have cheek flaps, that's fine. And the other style is called a nasal helm, which is basically a dome helmet, which could be Spangen helm style construction, but it also has a nasal plate. These are both perfectly fine for the time period and the location, both totally plausible. It's not really clear because it's a battle scene, but I'm basing it on what I can see. It looks like the English soldiers might be wearing some form of padded arming outfit, like a gambeson or some such. I'll have to wait until the game comes out to know for sure, but it looks like they're wearing some sort of padded armor. Padded armor's a win. And select members on the battlefield are also wearing some form of mail, which again is perfectly fine. So what helmets should the Vikings be wearing if they were to be wearing helmets? That's a hard question to answer, because there are only 4 pieces of evidence I know of for Viking helmets. 3 of them are only fragments. The Geirmundbu helmet, I hope I say that right, that's how I've always said it. If I'm wrong, hit me up in the comments, tell me how to say it properly. The Geirmundbu helmet is the closest to complete helmet that I know of for the Vikings specifically. That particular one is an ocular style helmet and pretty well decorated from what I can see. It's also possible that that particular helmet would have had a mail aventail of some sort. There are, I think, a couple of links sort of around the back of the helmet that are still attached, but I'm not entirely sure. Again, arms and armour, not my forte. Alright, let's talk about Alfred, our antagonist. There's a lot about this one to me that screams 1200s, 1300s. I could be a bit off on that one. Again, I haven't seen a full outfit. I've only seen this sort of mantle-y piece up the top here, but the level of embroidery, the type of silk that they've got going on there, the circlet, the symbology of the religious stuff in behind as well, that all says to me a little bit later. 1100s maybe at the earliest. It just doesn't strike me as right for the Viking invasion period. I will hold off a lot of my criticism until I see the full outfit, but I'm not sold that it's right at this point. Kite shields. A lot of the English soldiers are using kite shields, which might be out of place here. Again, I'm not an arms and armour expert, so I'm happy to be corrected if someone can source me in the comments. But as far as I know, the earliest depiction, that is an illustration of a kite shield, was in the Gospels of Otto around 980s-ish. So potentially that's about 100 years after this one is set. Maybe this particular part of the story is set pretty close to that, but then Ava would be getting pretty old, so I'm really not sure about that. The kite shields themselves look pretty well done, but they're a bit early. Spears in the Viking Age? Yes. The swords depicted here? Appropriate for the Viking Age. I just want to point out this particular still of the Vikings running into the battlefront. There appear to be 3 axe heads visible in this still, and all 3 of them seem to have really good silhouettes for the Viking time period. As far as I can make out, all of these silhouettes are typecast in the Peterson typology, as well as a couple of the other typologies, so we can definitely see these types of axes being used through the Viking Age. Totally plausible. However, we do see a couple of other axes in the battle that are fractionally less plausible. This axe does appear to be possibly being used by Eivors 2IC. I'm not entirely sure of the role of this character yet. The game hasn't been released. Their axe features what is essentially a variant on a butt spike. It's a little crenulated piece. It looks like it's got 3 lobes that are slightly pointed. And this gets used as a weapon during the battle. Now the placement of those spikes are, as far as I know, not accurate. They are definitely fantastical in its placement. However, the style of that adornment is not necessarily out of character for the Vikings. I've got 2 other axe heads here which are from the historical record from the Viking Age, and you can see that they are decorated. They also feature a similar style decoration to the axe from the trailer. So while we can say that the axe in the trailer is incorrect, it's still in theme, and I think that's pretty neat. If you're not going to be accurate, you can still be in keeping, and it makes for a nice immersive situation. So good on you, Ubisoft. Also, I want to point out that while Eivor's axe is heavily adorned on the handle, and that's not really well recorded, if at all, the decoration on the head itself is recorded. Maybe not that specific detailing, but adornments on the axe heads is recorded. You only need to look at the Marmon axe and similar ones to see how detailed that can be. So points for that. Okay, let's get to the climax of this trailer, which is that mountain of an individual who comes down to hand Eivor their butt. At first, I really wasn't sure about this one. It looked pure fantasy to me, and there are certain elements that are still pure fantasy, in my opinion. The scale mail there, it does look a little cataphract-esque, cavalry-esque, maybe not cataphract specifically, but it can't be cavalry. There's no practical way for you to wear that on a horse. There's no crotch split for you to be able to spread it evenly over your legs. I just don't know where they were going with that one. The harness over top as well, I think, is, if it's accurate, it must be much earlier, maybe Roman-esque, I'm not sure. So the body of the armour to me looks off. Having said that, I wasn't really confident about that helmet, and I still think the plume is like a Greco-Roman inspired add-on to it. Here's where I differ from Shadiversity. I don't think the helmet as a whole is all Greco-Roman. If you took the plume off it, what does it look like? To me, it looks like the Sutton Hoo helmet, which is English. It's Vendel period, which is immediately before the Viking period. So that is a plausible helmet. Yes, it has some stylistic differences, but they are minor. I think it is a huge nod to that Sutton Hoo helmet, and kudos to Ubisoft. I don't normally jump straight to Sutton Hoo as a thing to think about when I'm talking Viking period, but it totally makes sense. If we're talking, these are the Vikings that sort of first came and disrupted Wessex, which in terms of the historical timeline, they're probably not. But if that's what they're going for here in this game, then for them to have the end of Vendel period gear kind of makes sense. So the Sutton Hoo helmet has the eyebrows, it has the faceplate, and it has the cheek plates as well. It has that ridge along the top, which obviously Ubisoft has added the crest to. That's fine. I understand stylistically why you would add a plume to that. It looks authoritative, it looks like this person's higher in the ranks, and the way they behave is totally tanky. Yeah, you want that person to look boss. But if you took the plume off, that helmet is essentially the Sutton Hoo helmet, and I love Ubisoft's inclusion of that helmet. I just want to point out that our tank dude looks like he's wearing a velvet cloak. I thought at first it might just be wool, but it actually looks different in texture to the clothes that the leader of this warband is wearing. It does look slightly more velvet, and while technically yes, velvet could have been around in England at that point, why would you wear it on the battlefield like that? That's an expensive textile. Alright, that's my take on it for this particular trailer. I very much look forward to the game being released and being able to play through it. I hope you've enjoyed this bit more in-depth dive into all the different aspects that we can see. If you would like to know more about any of these particular ones, hit me up in the comments, but I'm also leaving some links to some further reading in the description, so check those out. If you'd like to see me do a review of the game when it's finally released, leave a comment down below saying as much, and we'll see what we can do. The game's not due to be released until the holiday period this year, so who knows what the exact date will be at this point, but could be pretty awesome. Thank you for watching. No shade at Shadiversity. I just disagree a little bit on the assessment on the helmet. I actually really agree with a lot of the other stuff that he mentioned in his video, and I think that you should definitely check out his video as well. That's it, that's all for today. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time. Bye for now. The Vikings are wearing helmets. Did I say that right? What do you reckon? Would I make it into the English army? Do you think Alfred would have me? It's finally cold enough to start wearing my wool stuff again, so you can be betting your bottom dollar that's what I'm gonna be doing. This was a pretty long video. You can have 20 points.